Thanks very much for the invitation to join your study day this morning. I'd like in the next few minutes to try and put things in perspective, Alzheimer's disease and dementias. Dementia is a very broad diagnosis. It's a bit like saying the patient has a headache. It really doesn't mean much, because there are many reasons for headaches, many different types of headaches. And the same thing with dementia. It's important to remember that dementia is a symptom. And there are many different types of dementia. And now we can differentiate the various types. And by differentiating the various types, we should be able to know what to expect behavior-wise from the patient. Because the main issue managing patients with dementia is how to cope with them, because they appear to be unpredictable. They appear to be irrational. And yet there is some meaning in it. And it's only by knowing the various types of dementia that we can understand how these people are thinking. We get into their thinking process, and then you can preempt and you can avert many situations that could end with a catastrophe. So I first would like to emphasize that dementia represents a deterioration of mental functions. So there are mental functions that have deteriorated. The individual with dementia used to have much better cognitive functions, mental functions. The individual could think properly, could make decisions, could memorize things, and was mentally competent. So it's very, very important to remember that it represents a deterioration in mental functions. The other important criteria, in fact, without it you cannot diagnose dementia, is that it does interfere with the daily activities. So the two preconditions for the diagnosis of dementia is first, that there is a deterioration in cognitive or mental functions, and two, that it is interfering with the daily activities. But even within this group, there are many subgroups. The most common one is Alzheimer's disease. And in Alzheimer's disease, the major impairment is in memory. But this is one type of dementia. And you'll see in a few minutes, we are going to fill up all this bottom part of the screen with different types of dementia. Having said this, I see many, many patients referred to me in the clinic who come because of memory impairment, and therefore they have Alzheimer's disease. Could you please corroborate the diagnosis? And there are some criteria about this memory impairment in Alzheimer's disease. The first one is that it is global, not selective. Yesterday, I had a patient who was brought in by the son and daughter-in-law. And the problem was he can't remember anything. And I said, well, what country? Give me examples. Doc, we told you, he forgets everything, can't remember a thing. I said, well, I need examples, give me some examples. And they say, well, for instance, he forgets to return our phone calls. And I thought, well, maybe he's not really all that keen to return your phone call. Or he forgets when he goes shopping, he forgets to buy whatever we ask him to buy. And the question is, well, maybe he doesn't like what you've got on your list and he's not going to buy it. So this is the selective memory impairment, when you forget what you want to forget, or what deep down you don't really think is all that important. Somebody phones you, you really don't feel like talking to that person, you're going to ignore the call and you're not going to respond to it later. If your wife is giving you a list, and on the list of things to buy it says beans, and you don't like beans, you're not going to buy the beans. She's going to be very upset. She'll say, you keep forgetting. I asked you to buy the beans. Why didn't you bring them? The man doesn't like beans. Okay? But this is selective memory impairment. In Alzheimer's disease, memory impairment is global. It is non-selective. It affects everything. And one question I usually ask is, do you forget to pay bills? Oh yes, doc, he forgets to pay all the bills. Does he forget to cash any check that comes in? Oh no, he doesn't forget to cash the checks. That's selective memory impairment. All of us at one time or another, we forget to pay our bills. Deep down, we resent it. We don't really want to pay that bill. Okay? So you see the difference between global non-selective and selective memory impairment. And it's important, and I always tell my residents, you really need to spend some time with the family and the patient, and they've got to be separate to find out exactly what type of memory is lost. And the goal is it global, non-selective, in which case it may be Alzheimer's disease, or is it selective, in which case it probably is not Alzheimer's disease. The other condition is that it does interfere with the daily activities. One of the patients who was brought in to me because of possible Alzheimer's disease, his wife dropped him at Walmart, and he worked there. But he had to go to the office first. And 2 hours later, the wife receives a phone call, "Where is your husband? We're expecting him." She said, "I dropped him at the shop 2 hours ago." And the man was roaming around in the aisles, could not find his way, could not remember where the office was, so he just kept on going around. So this is memory impairment that it is interfering with the daily activities, as opposed to forgetting to buy the beans or returning a phone call. All right? But that's not the whole story. The patient also must have some evidence of anomia. And anomia is a very fancy word for not remembering words. So you show the patient this and you say, "What is this?" And the patient cannot remember the word watch or wristwatch. So he says, "This is what tells you the time." Cannot think of the word watch, but sees it, recognizes it, knows it is a watch, but cannot think of the word watch. You show the patient this and you say, "What is this?" And the patient says, "That's what opens the door." Cannot think of the word key. And this is what we call anomia. As time goes by, the patient also develops agnosia, and agnosia is a fancy term for not recognizing things. So now you show the patient this and you tell him what it is. Patient hasn't got a clue what it is. May think it is a comb and try to comb himself, or a spoon and try to eat the food with it. This is agnosia. The importance of agnosia is that if the patient cannot recognize that the food she's about to eat is rotten, that's the second time I do that. The food that, can you fix it please? If the patient cannot recognize that the food she's about to eat is rotten, she will eat it. And then, thank you, and then she may have food poisoning. And this explains why some patients with Alzheimer's disease would start eating grass, soil, anything that is not edible, because they don't really recognize it. And the other implication is that if somebody knocks at your door and the person looks very rough, hasn't shaved for a few days, hair is all over the place, clothes are dirty, and asks to come in and use your phone, you probably will say no. If on the other hand the man comes and he's clean cut and very well shaven, very well spoken, well dressed, and say, "I'm sorry, my car is stuck outside, can I please use your phone?" you probably will say yes. What you've done, what's the difference between the two? Your perception of one is, that guy looks all right, but this one I'm not so sure about him. And you will see in a few minutes when we talk about how to cope with these patients. Because they cannot recognize things, they can eat food that has gotten rotten, they can eat something that is not meant to be eaten. They may trust someone who shouldn't be trusted. That's not the whole thing. As time goes by, the patient also develops apraxia. And by apraxia, we mean the patient is not able to carry on voluntary activities, even though there is no weakness. If you allow me to take my coat off, and I want you to think what is going on in my body. I want you to think of the relationship between my brain, my hands, wrists, elbows, and shoulders when I put the coat on. And also the relationship between the eyes, going to the vision center, going to the brain center that is going to coordinate my activities, so that using both hands, I see my coat. Simultaneously, I see the coat, I recognize it, I know where is the front, where is the side, and the instructions go from my brain to my arms to pick up the coat, bearing in mind all the time where the coat is. Where is the front, where is the back, where are the sleeves. I then position the coat in the right position, put my hand in one arm, the other one in the other arm, and then I adjust it. You can imagine all the impulses that are flowing from the hands, the fingers, the eyes to the brain. Everything is coordinated, and then instructions go to the arms to put the coat on. Think about unbuttoning and buttoning a button. It's a very, very skillful maneuver. We do it for granted. Okay? We take all these connections for granted. In Alzheimer's disease, the brain is not able to process all these activities in time. There is no weakness, but they're just unable to put things together and say, oh, this is my coat. The reason I know it's my coat and not somebody else's coat is I paid for it. No, it's, I know, I've been wearing it, okay? And it's not somebody else's. Same thing if the phone rings. If I hear my phone ring, I'm going to pick it up. But, and if you feel your phone ring, you're going to pick it up. You're not going to come and pick up my phone. So we recognize things and we take appropriate action. Judgment is impaired, and this happens very, very early. In fact, it happens well before these happen, and this is important to bear in mind to make sure that the assets of the individual are protected. So you want to get into all sorts of legal issues to make sure that somebody has power of attorney, somebody has a durable power of attorney, make sure that the patient doesn't write checks. So maybe a patient needs another signature, so the patient can sign the check, but the check is not valid until somebody else signs it. Same thing with the credit cards, or put a limit. But impaired judgment occurs very early, and appropriate steps need to be taken as early as possible. The onset is quite insidious. So you ask the relatives, when did it all start? And the son may say, I think it started a year ago, summertime. And then the daughter said, no, I really think it started even before. Don't you remember at Christmas he did A, B, and C? And then the wife would chip in and say, well, it happened 2-3 years even before this. This is the main reason he had to retire. The fact that family members cannot agree on a date when it started, and they would, for instance, say, oh, it all started Thanksgiving. We're all sitting around the table having our dinner, and suddenly the man stopped. And then after that, he started talking, but he was talking gibberish. And then his condition improved. And then he had another big setback 6 months later. Again, we were at a get-together. We're all sitting together, having, eating and drinking. And then he suddenly stopped, and maybe he jerked a little bit. And then everything was all right, but there was a significant deterioration in his mental functions. What he was having are repeated strokes. Okay? So the onset is insidious, and also there is no insight. So you ask a patient who's got memory problem that is global and non-selective, interfering with the daily activities, and has all these problems, and you tell the patient, well, your memory is really bad. You couldn't remember what you had for breakfast today. And the answer of the patient is going to be, why do you ask anyhow? What difference does it make what I eat? Why do you ask me all these questions? Who are you? And this is because not only they have no insight, but they have paranoid delusions, and they're very, very suspicious of other people. One of the reasons they're suspicious of other people is they don't recognize them. And can you imagine what it is every day, waking up in the morning, not recognizing the person who's with you? Total stranger, haven't got a clue. We spend the night together, we're in bed together. I don't know who this person is. We'll talk more about this when we talk about the problems these patients face. But this is, in a nutshell, Alzheimer's disease. It's important to remember that even though memory impairment is the major thing, there are many other things that occur up to 30 months, 3 years before the diagnosis is made with the impaired memories. Language problems are having language problems. I haven't got enough time, maybe discussion time we can talk about it. They withdraw from society, their ability to learn new things diminishes, and the typical thing is in the office, if they bring a new computer system or change the lines of hierarchy, the patient cannot adjust to it. They often become depressed, they have paranoid tendencies. Suicidal ideation is almost 2 years before the diagnosis is made. And these people feel that there is something going on. They cannot get to terms with, what is it? I'm just not the same person. I cannot think straight. I cannot recognize people. I cannot remember things. I cannot read. When I read, by the time I reach the end of the page, I've already forgotten what is said at the beginning. Initially, they have some insight, and it's very, very stressing. And this is why we have suicidal ideation here. As their condition deteriorates, they start losing insight. And the risk of committing suicide actually decreases, but then they start accusing other people, they have mood swings, they become irritable, they may have delusions, and the condition keeps on worsening. So what I'm trying to say is that memory is important. Memory is when usually the diagnosis is made for Alzheimer's disease, but there are many other things that should be taken into consideration. So this is Alzheimer's disease. Major problem is memory impairment. Another type of dementia which relatives find very, very difficult to cope with is Lewy body dementia. And in the West, in Western civilization, this is the second commonest cause of dementia. And the two characteristic features of Lewy body dementia are the fluctuations and the hallucinations. So 1 minute the patient may appear to be totally rational, and you can have a very, very sensible conversation with her. And then 30 seconds later, she's completely off. Hasn't got a clue who she is, who are the people surrounding her are, and becomes cognitively impaired. And then 10 minutes later, she perks up again and she's quite all right. And the same thing with the level of consciousness. So 1 minute she's up, she's alert, and she's talkative. Next minute she's somnolent and not responding to anything. And then everything is fine. So these fluctuations drive the relatives crazy because they say, she's putting it on, she's obnoxious, she's doing this on purpose, she's ignoring us. Because look, now she's quite rational. And 2 minutes later she's not. It's not so quick, but we have these fluctuations. The other thing about Lewy body dementia is they have formed hallucinations. So they see, and they believe that they see people who are not there. They see objects, they see animals, and are fully convinced that these people exist, or these visions exist. And it's best not to contradict them, because if you contradict them, you just irritate them even more. 2 minutes? 3 minutes, okay. So this is the Lewy body dementia. We talked about this. Another type of dementia is the frontotemporal dementia. You notice when I talked about Lewy body dementia, I did not mention memory. Memory is not a big problem there. The big problem is making decisions. The frontotemporal dementia, the main problem is disinhibition. So you have somebody who is a very straightforward person, law-abiding, wouldn't do anything indecent. Now he starts exposing himself. Now he starts looking at pornographic material. A change in personality, mostly disinhibition, some language problems. This is Lewy body dementia. And the main thing, as I said, is the disinhibition. If there are some neurological signs, patient has weakness on one side, then we're thinking of multi-infarct dementia, which is the third commonest type. And in Eastern Europe and underdeveloped countries, it is the main cause for dementia because this is due to repeated strokes. Some of the strokes are big enough to give rise to neurological signs, but many times the strokes are so small that there is no obvious deficit, but mentally they keep going down. Unfortunately, AIDS is another cause for dementia with neurological signs. If there is a generalized slowing down, then you need to think in terms of Parkinson's disease. And if the diagnosis of Parkinson's and dementia, if there is more than a year between the two diagnoses, likelihood is that this patient has Parkinson's dementia. And you know the typical features of Parkinson's disease. The person is rigid, has a stooped attitude, has the pill rolling and the shuffling gait. And these are the typical features of Parkinson's disease. They may be very evident or not very evident, but the main thing is there is a general slowing down. Their handwriting becomes very, very small. I need to speed up because my timekeeper gives me dirty looks. Okay, And the last one I want to talk about is hydrocephalus. The main problem here is the gait. Hydrocephalus is there is fluid accumulating inside the brain, squeezes the brain between the skull and the fluid, and the brain literally atrophies. And the main features is the gait is very rigid. It's as if they can hardly move. And these patients have hydrocephalus. They also become incontinent of urine. The reason I'm mentioning is that surgery has a lot to offer, and if the diagnosis is made within 3 months, the condition improves quite a lot. Okay, so these are the various types of dementia, and you see how different they are. Now, doesn't matter what type of dementia, the easiest way to classify the stage is into these 3 stages. The mild, where you need to protect the patient from predators in society. We'll talk more about this if we have time. Here the patient appears to be normal, but the main issue is judgment is impaired. In the moderate stages, you've got to protect the patient from herself, because in the moderate stages, she would want to reach a shelf up, so she's going to go put a chair on the table, climb on the table, and then on the chair, and then fall and break her hip. So here you need to protect the patient from herself. The late stages are severe. These patients essentially need nursing care. I'm going to stop because time is running out, and I hope we'll have time in the discussion time to talk more about what are the main issues and how to cope with these issues. Thank you. I thought you had yours. I thought that was mine.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to just snap it on.
Yeah, I think if you just...
I don't move around like he does. Is that good? All right. Well, good morning. Happy to see everybody. I'm happy to be here. It's a privilege to be asked to speak. I'm going to go over some community resources. I looked at resources in Washington and Sullivan counties in and around Johnson City. First of all, I'd like to talk about the impact on the caregiver, the diagnosis of dementia, Alzheimer's. The caregivers are a big part of the diagnosis, whether you believe it or not, because they're living with that person 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, let me see, where's my little... So just a few statistics before we get to the good stuff. 2013, there were 15.5 million family and friends who provided 17 billion hours of care to those diagnosed with dementias. This was unpaid care, and the care was valued at $220 billion. That is nearly 8 times the total revenue that McDonald's made in 2012. So it's a lot of time, a lot of expertise that everybody, all the caregivers are learning. Being a caregiver with for someone with Alzheimer's and dementia can have a devastating toll on the caregiver. And due to the physical and emotional burden of caregiving, Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers had $9.3 billion in healthcare costs themselves. Nearly 60% of all Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers rate the emotional stress of caregiving at high or very high, and more than 1/3 report symptoms of depression. How many caregivers do we have in here today? So that's all making sense to you. All right, so this is a caregiver stress checklist. So we'll just read through it real quickly. This is from Alzheimers.org, and this is some of the questions that they ask. Do you feel like you have to do it all yourself and that you should be doing more? You just feel like you're never really doing enough. Withdrawal from family, friends, and activities that you used to enjoy. You worry that the person you care for is safe. Do you feel anxious about money and healthcare decisions? Do you deny the impact of the disease and its effect on your family? Do you feel grief or sadness that your relationship with this person isn't what it used to be? Do you get frustrated and angry when the person with dementia continually repeats things and doesn't seem to listen? And do you have health problems that are taking a toll on you mentally and physically? Now, some symptoms of caregiver stress kind of go and flow with those questions that we asked. But denial about the disease and its effect on the person who has been diagnosed. I know mom is going to get better. It's not always going to be this way. Anger at the person with Alzheimer's. Anger that there's no cure, or anger that people don't understand what's happening. So you might hear somebody say, if he asked me that question one more time, you feel like you're going to lose your mind. Social withdrawal from friends and activities that once brought pleasure. You might find yourself saying, I don't care about getting together with the neighbors anymore. I don't have time. Anxiety about the future. What happens when he needs more care than I can provide? Depression that begins to break your spirit and affects your ability to cope. You just don't care anymore. Exhaustion that makes it nearly impossible to complete necessary daily tasks. I'm just too tired for this. Sleeplessness caused by a never-ending list of concerns. What if she wanders out of the house? What if she falls and hurts herself? What if I don't hear her? Irritability that leads to moodiness and triggers negative responses and actions. Sometimes you just want to be left alone. Lack of concentration that makes it difficult to perform familiar tasks. I was so busy I forgot an appointment. Health problems that begin to take a mental and physical toll. Caregiver might actually say, I don't remember the last time I felt good. If you experience any of these signs of stress on a regular basis, now we all have our days, but if it's on a regular basis, you want to consult with your healthcare provider. Because what did we say the biggest thing was? Depression for the caregiver. So let's talk about what we can do to help the caregiver as well as the patient. Local resources here in Sullivan and Washington counties. The services, they're great sources of information, and they can let you know what you qualify within your community. There are nutrition, transportation, respite services, adult daycare services, and support groups. So I've got, can you see them okay? Okay, so I put the phone numbers. I just put the main contact, Johnson City Senior Services, the First Tennessee Area Agency on Aging and Disability, Alzheimer's Association, Home Instead Senior Care, and First Tennessee Human Resource Agency. All of these have wonderful resources, but they're only wonderful if you take advantage of them.
Is that available on a handout?
I believe are they having this available online, or?
It should be online, right? We'll eventually get it there. Yeah, it won't be there Monday morning, but we will get it there.
Okay, so they'll have it
Some
online.
of these resources will already be on the website.
Okay, yeah, like your website.
Just not on this one.
Right.
And what is the website?
What is the website?
It is, you ready to write? www.tn, as in Tennessee, .gov, and there's a slash, it's a / that's gonna go this way, and then the word aging, A-G-I-N-G.
And you have that on your literature. Okay, so if you've picked up anything out there, you've got it. Okay, in your folder. Yeah, all right. Okay, dementia is life-changing for both those who are diagnosed and those close to them. Support groups provide a place to connect with other caregivers who truly understand what you're going through. And that's what we hear caregivers say a lot. I want support from people who really understand because they've been there too. An Alzheimer's caregiver support group offers just that, a safe place for caregivers, family, and friends of persons with dementia to meet and develop a mutual support system. It's a place to exchange practical information on the caregiving problems and possible solutions that you may have come across. You may have had a situation that somebody hasn't had yet. So they come upon that and you can tell them, well, this worked for me, or that worked for me, or this is who I called. So it brings you together and it allows you to share tips and resources. It allows you to talk through challenges and ways of coping, and to share feelings, needs, and concerns. A lot of times the caregivers, who do you talk to? Who will understand what you're saying? Sometimes your children don't think it's that bad, or they don't want to think it's that bad. Or right away they want to change your living arrangements. So, and also you can learn about resources available in your community. Now, all the support groups through the Alzheimer's Association are facilitated by trained individuals. And I believe I have. These are the 4 groups that I found in Washington and Sullivan counties. And they will also be on the website that's located in your folder. But there are phone numbers. And on the site here, it tells you, they meet the second Tuesday at 6 o'clock, second Thursday at 6 o'clock. But you can certainly call them and get directions as well. In addition to caregiver support groups, they also have support groups for people with early stages Alzheimer's. And like Dr. Hamdy was talking about that insight part, and then they have the high incidence suicidal ideation. Support groups may help.
Ma'am,
Yes.
Preston Place 2, also in Kingsport, also has support groups.
Oh, excellent. It's called Preston Place
Number 2.
number 2. Okay. And that's
First
it.
one is assisted living, but Preston Place 2 is for people with dementia and cannot care for themselves.
And do they live there?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Nice. All right. So that's Preston Place 2, and it's in Kingsport.
Yes.
Yes.
Center on Aging and Health in Irwin. It's a Alzheimer dedicated unit
A unit.
with its own courtyard.
Nice. Okay. And then,
A pig and a cat is our.
well, what could go wrong as long as they don't try to eat the pig? Okay.
Rosemont Bristol also has a unit.
Okay. All right. And I did see some of these listed. I couldn't list them all, so that's why I kind of gave the major resource numbers. But that's all. That's wonderful. And that just proves that when caregivers get together, you can share information. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So sometimes caregivers and their family member need assistance with nutrition. I don't know if anybody has heard of the program Meals on Wheels, but that's what it's often referred to. So I went through the First Tennessee Human Resource Agency offers nutrition and meal programs. They have community meals that are in a setting, but they also serve meals to the homebound. So I listed some phone numbers here. Sullivan County, they have their own set, and then Washington County. And adult day services. These facilities take care of the elderly so the caregiver can go to work, run errands, pay bills, go to doctor's appointments. This is just, actually it's a type of a respite kind of thing. Gives the caregiver time to take care of things that they need to take care of. These are 2 that I found in the 2 counties that we've been talking about. But the First Tennessee Health Human Resource Agency, their phone number, and then Pine Oaks Assisted Living also has a day center. And if anybody else, yeah, okay. Next, I'd like to talk about respite services. We're almost finished. Respite care can be provided at home by a friend, another family member, volunteer, or a paid service. Everybody needs a break. And a lot of times, people say, well, I'm the only one that can take care of him, or I'm the only one that can take care of her. She'll only listen to me. But if you're the one doing everything, you're going to break down, whether it's physically and or emotionally. So, respite care provides caregivers a temporary rest from caregiving, while the person with Alzheimer's continues to receive care in a safe environment. Respite care can provide a chance to spend time with other friends and family, or just time to relax, period. Time to take care of errands, like I talked about, shopping, paying bills, exercising, getting a haircut. You have to have time to go out and get a haircut, or to go to the doctor. And then the caregiver can have comfort and peace of mind knowing that the person with dementia is spending time with somebody who is qualified to take care of them.
Also has that service.
I'm sorry?
Oh,
Oh, the respite, yeah. I'll get, I have that on here as well. And Appalachian Christian Village does as well. Yes?
Are these people that come into your home, are they bonded?
Yes, if you go through a company, and I know, let's see, well, here, I have it right here. Appalachian Christian Village, they're all insured, bonded, all that good stuff. Home Instead, they advertise, they come into the home. They offer several different services, and they're all bonded and insured. All right, so different kind of respites. We talked about the adult day center. We did not talk about residential facilities. They may offer the option for the patient or the dementia patient to spend the night, even a few days or a few weeks. So that's another option to give you a break. And I just want to stress, with respite care, it's always important to plan ahead because emergencies, unplanned situations come up, unexpected trips that you have to take can create a need for immediate care. So you want to try out people before something like this happens. You know, contact a neighbor or a family member. Make sure you have a list of their medicines, a list of their doctor's phone numbers. So if something happens and you need to leave quickly, your neighbor down the street, 2 doors down, knows the situation, is familiar, and can come and give you a break so that you can handle whatever is coming up. Yes?
We used to have people come in the hospital that cared for an elderly
Uh-huh.
family member, and we would have to help them, somewhere for that elderly family member to go or someone coming to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And it was always best if they already
Had it set up, right, absolutely. And it's not something you think about. As a caregiver, you're dealing with those day-to-day issues. You're just trying to survive. You're not even thinking, good God, what if I get sick and I'm in the hospital for a few days?
But, you know, if they are, all the agencies out there, all your center companies, your nursing homes can help and will help.
Right. And that's the point of this, is to let people know that there is help. You know, just like you said, we all know it's there. But sometimes it seems like a big secret, you know, what nobody knows until it's time. So it does help to educate yourself. And you have to overcome concerns such as costs, reliability, and the big one is guilt. You may believe that you should be able to do it all. And I'm here to tell you, you can't. Nobody can. Seeking help doesn't mean you're a failure. So it's important to remember your respite services and your community resources. And just a little bit more about what respite care provides. So I'd just like to encourage you to contact your community resources, your insurance companies, because sometimes they pay for these services. and we just don't know. So you can just flip that insurance card over and call the number on the back and say, what is my loved one's benefits for respite care, for home care? Just find out for yourself. So planning is so important. That's all I have. I thank you for your time. And Dr. Hamdy, anybody have questions? Like to discuss anything? Yes, sir.
The Alzheimer's website, that is just a tremendous
It's-
wealth of information.
Yes, sir. That
And
all.
there's message boards. You know, sometimes it's nice to know that there's somebody else who's going to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
It's just, I mean, I've found, you know, it's almost overwhelming. There's so much information.
And I was going through that site, and there are online support groups too, if you can't leave to go out, to go to one in person. But yeah, the information is phenomenal. Yes, ma'am.
This is more for, I guess, Dr. Hamdy.
Mhm.
Are there many practitioners of geriatric medicine in this region, particularly in Washington County, is where I live?
The question is about are there geriatricians in the area here. Long time ago, we've decided that we'll never be able to get enough geriatricians to service all the population. And if you look at it objectively, there is no way. There are so many people of the age of 60, 65, and then you say, okay, I'm not going to look at people 60 and older. I'm only going to look at people 80 and older, or 85 and older. It doesn't work this way. So a long time ago, we've looked at this problem and said there is no way we're going to have enough geriatricians. We used to have a fellowship program here for geriatric medicine that was fully accredited. We stopped it. And our philosophy now is we do not need more geriatricians. We need better trained internists and family physicians. And the whole emphasis of the medical school as far as geriatrics is concerned is really to train as many of these students who eventually are going to go to internal medicine and family medicine to become better trained geriatrician, because the family physician has a wealth of information about the patient. He's known them for ages and ages, and now the person retires and the physician whom he knows and trusts says, I'm not really interested anymore in you, I'm going to hand you over to the geriatrician. He doesn't know the man at all, and you've got to start building a relationship from scratch. So our philosophy has been we're going to try and train as many internists, as many family physicians in geriatric medicine as possible. And it makes a lot of sense because if you talk about prevention should start very early. We don't want to wait until the age of 65 and say, okay, I haven't done a pap smear or a mammogram or any of these things. So if you look for geriatricians, you're not going to find them. But you're going to find a lot of very good internists and family physicians who are certified in geriatric medicine and who take a lot of interest. Yes, ma'am?
Dr. Hamdy, there are people at my workplace that, and me included, younger and some older, that will start to say a sentence, and right in the middle of it, they just quit and don't remember what they were going to say. Typically, is that a sign of dementia?
If it hasn't been there before, yes. So the two things with dementia is, as we mentioned, the memory is impaired in Alzheimer's disease, but also the attention span is very short, and they get distracted very, very easily. And in fact, we use this easy distractibility to avert some of the potentially catastrophic situations. So if the patient says, for instance, I want to go and drive, rather than telling the patient, oh no, you can't drive, don't you remember you saw the doctor and said, you've got dementia and you cannot drive, immediately you're setting yourself in confrontation. But if you tell the patient, oh gee, I forgot to tell you, the car wasn't working yesterday, I took it to the mechanic, he's going to have a look at it tomorrow, but come, let's go, I want to show you something, come with me. And you distract the patient. So easy distractibility is what is causing that patient to start a sentence and then get distracted, wander off somewhere else. But you can also use this to your advantage if the patient wants to do something that he shouldn't be doing. Yes, ma'am.
My mother
lives in Ohio, so I'm trying to keep up with her from afar. And went with her to her primary care physician in August, and he recommended that she have an MRI. She's experiencing, I think, pretty significant memory loss. My brother downplays it, he lives there, he sees her more often. There's always one in the family, you know? But what kinds of things would an MRI show for someone who's...
Yeah, the question about MRIs and so this patient had an MRI offered. They're looking for the multi-infarct dementia, they're looking for small strokes that may have occurred that may explain it. They also may be looking for hydrocephalus. So these are the two main conditions. The brain atrophy in Alzheimer's disease is generalized. With the frontotemporal dementia, it's more the front part of the brain. So this is what the MRI would show, essentially whether they had strokes, hydrocephalus, or whether the atrophy is localized to one part of the brain. Do you have a question?
Going off what she said, I often start sentences and forget where I'm at. I have the one that, where you can't,
You recognize things or find the word?
find the word.
Okay.
And I've shown up in Jonesboro when I was going to Walmart. Is this stress related or is
The
it?
question that you need to ask yourself, if you remember right at the beginning, I said you need two things. You need mental deterioration and you need interference with daily activities. If the mental deterioration does not interfere with your daily activities, it's not dementia. So it could be stress, it could be depression, it could be you've got a million things on your mind that you cannot concentrate. But it happens very frequently. I remember when we moved houses, I left work and then I would find myself in front of the old house.
Well, let's thank Dr. Hamdy and Dr. Arns.